Ancient Egypt, Unit 1, Ancient Civilizations. By the end of this video, you should be able to describe the role of geography on Egyptian civilization, describe characteristics of each kingdom in Egypt, define the words oasis, bureaucracy, and tribute, and identify what makes empires strong and why they decline. The geography of Egypt. The central feature of Egyptian geography is the Nile River. It's an oasis, which is a fertile area with water in what is otherwise a desert region. It's the primary source of life in Egypt. Even today, 90% of the people live somewhere along the Nile River. It provides food, water, and irrigation, and the annual flood cycle, when the Nile floods its banks, creates very fertile soil in the region. The river also led to innovation. The ancient Egyptians developed sailboats that would allow them to go both directions on the river, both with the current and against. Egypt was originally two kingdoms. Upper Egypt was the southern region in the Nile River Valley, and Lower Egypt was the northern region on the river delta where the Nile empties into the Mediterranean Sea. The Old Kingdom was united under King Menes. He produced a stable, prosperous civilization that went into decline only after about 1,000 years, and the decline was caused by a weakened monarchy and a cycle of drought and famine. One of the accomplishments of ancient Egypt under the Old Kingdom was the construction of the Sphinx, which you see pictured in the foreground at the left. Next came the Middle Kingdom, which was also characterized by strong monarchs. You see one of those engraved in a statue at the right. It had an organized bureaucracy or group of officials who helped to run the government, highly structured social classes, and secure borders that reduced invasions. The Middle Kingdom unified the church with the government or the state of Egypt. The pharaoh was regarded as a god who had absolute power and could grant the blessings of life after death to the people. The pyramids were constructed as tombs for the pharaohs, and it shows the importance of the pharaoh to the Egyptian people and how much power and influence they believed that he had. It also shows their ability to sustain a long-term project and the level of organization that they had to carry out such an engineering project with the precision and the number of workers required to build these structures. Other accomplishments during the Middle Kingdom include writing on papyrus, which has a tendency to curl, so that's why they rolled the paper, the parchment, into scrolls. The writing was in two forms. The priests used hieroglyphics, but the scribes, who did the bulk of the writing, used a shorthand form of that called hieratic script. They developed an embalming process for bodies after people had died. They used a 12-month calendar that had 30 days per month. You can see the influences of their interactions with Mesopotamia in their art, their architecture, and their writing. And maybe most uniquely, the role of women in the Middle Kingdom was interesting. Women had more choices and more power than women had in any other society at the time, and they were allowed to serve as pharaohs, scribes, and priestesses with all the same powers and privileges that men in those positions had. Finally, we'll talk about the New Kingdom of Egypt. The New Kingdom underwent a great deal of territorial expansion, both in the north and to the east and west, up the Nile and along the Mediterranean seacoast. In these areas, they put local officials in charge, and those local officials were responsible for paying tribute or a tax to the king. There was a civil service organization to help manage the collection of taxes, and the Egyptian military was deployed around the region so that there wouldn't be constant rebellions from people who were now living under Egyptian control. Some pretty drastic changes occurred with regard to religion during the New Kingdom, and these changes were initiated by Amenhotep IV, who instituted worship of the sun god Aten against, or as opposed to worshiping many gods. He moved the capital and built a temple. When King Tutankhamun took power after the previous pharaoh, he restored the polytheistic worship, which made him pretty popular among the Egyptians. He isn't really known for much else beyond that, but he is probably one of the most famous pharaohs. He's known as King Tut. His tomb was discovered in the 1920s, largely intact, so that historians and archaeologists learned a lot about the burial traditions of the pharaohs and the way that they believed about the afterlife based on what they took into the tomb. Another fairly well-known pharaoh from this time period is Ramses II. He tried to regain area that had been lost to the Hittites up in the region of Mesopotamia along the Mediterranean coast, but by the time that he came to power, the new kingdom of Egypt was in decline. When we look at the three kingdoms of Egypt, we can understand some principles about the way empires function. They need strong, charismatic leaders. When the pharaohs of Egypt were strong, the Egyptian kingdoms were strong. They need an efficient bureaucracy or group of people to help manage the government. They need scribes to keep records and write down laws, and they need officials to collect taxes and handle other issues of government. They need a powerful, well-organized army that can control the people and limit rebellion. And they need to be able to distribute power to a local government that's administered by people who are loyal to the king. When any of these factors is weakened, then power changes hands. You can see that kingdoms are conquered and one empire will replace another. And this pattern is true in both Mesopotamia and Egypt. That's the end of our notes on ancient Egypt. Remember that you can rewind or rewatch this video as many times as you need to. Thank you, and have a great day.